You feel like you're doing everything you can. You already understand how it works. You've studied frequency. You've heard about reality collapse. You've understood that observation creates, that the field responds, that consciousness is the greatest creative power. You've seen this written in books, videos, and courses. You believe it, but even so, it still seems like reality is not responding. You find yourself saying the right things, acting differently, making new choices, breathing more deeply, asserting yourself with more conviction. But deep inside, there's a subtle yet piercing feeling that nothing really moved. The faces change, the scenes alternate, but deep down, the pattern seems the same. You feel like you're living with a new consciousness, but receiving the same answers. And this is where doubt begins to whisper. Is something in me still out of alignment? Am I just pretending to have changed? Could it be that there is a deeper layer where I still vibrate the old, even without realizing it? And as uncomfortable as these questions are, perhaps they are revealing something essential, that the true transition, it doesn't happen when you understand the new. It happens when you stop collapsing the old. The mind may have advanced, but what about the body and its energy field, and its daily gestures, its automatic reactions, its silences charged with fear, urgency, and expectation? Have they also advanced, or do they still operate on the same axis as before, only now clothed in a more spiritualized language? This is where many seekers get lost. They confuse intellectual clarity with vibrational transformation. They believe that because they understand the logic of manifestation, reality should already bend in gratitude and return visible miracles. But the quantum field doesn't respond to understanding. It responds to stabilized coherence. And coherence is not what you say. It's not what you write in your affirmations notebook. It's not what you desire while meditating with your eyes closed. Coherence is the vibration that your body transmits while living, while reacting, while going through the ordinary day, while making small decisions, while no one is watching. You can say, "I am abundant," 1,000 times. But if the moment an unexpected bill arrives, your chest closes, your system shuts down, and your mind races to think about how to survive, the field hears that. The field collapses from that, because that's what's stable. You may say you're ready for love, but if at the slightest sign of approach your energy hides, defends itself, contracts, then that's the frequency that commands. And the field, neutral and precise, responds with absence, not for punishment, but for consistency. And that's not a problem, it's a mirror. A vibrational mirror that's trying to show you where you still vibrate as someone who hasn't changed. As someone who still hopes instead of sustaining. As someone who still projects instead of embodying. The quantum transition doesn't start when you change your mind. It starts when you stop living like someone who needs the world to change first. And maybe now you're starting to realize it's not that reality is ignoring you. It's that on some level, you have not yet become incompatible with the old one. There's still a part of you that knows how to repeat the pattern very well. That knows how to react as before. That still responds to life as if the new were still arriving, and not was already vibrating inside you. This is the fine line where most transitions stagnate, when the seeker believes they have changed because their mind has understood, but continues to collapse the old with their body, with their field, with the silent vibrational tone they transmit while simply living. But now that you see it, something has already started to change. Because what is seen without defense begins to dissolve, and this is where the true transition begins. Not as a spectacle, but as silence. A silence where the new has not yet manifested itself, but the old no longer finds a home. You can spend years studying manifestation, quantum physics, neuroscience, and spirituality. You can accumulate beautiful words, sophisticated insights, and impeccable arguments about how the universe works. And all of this has value. All of this expands. But there comes a point where knowledge begins to fail, not because it's wrong, but because he didn't go down far enough. The quantum transition doesn't happen when you understand it. It happens when you embody, not when you mentally repeat a new truth, but when you live this truth with your body, with the nervous system, with the emotions that arise when the world doesn't deliver what you asked for, and yet you remain whole, present, stable. This is the border between the old and the new, a space where understanding is no longer enough, where theory no longer holds the vibrational tone, where the field demands something deeper than clarity. It demands residence. You need to reside in the new, and that's very different from desiring the new. Wishing is easy, understanding is easy, but sustaining a new frequency, no external evidence, no validation, no visible security, is what separates the real transition from the cycle of failed attempts. Because you see, the field doesn't respond to your logic. It responds to your emotional consistency. If you still react to delay with anxiety, if you still interpret silence as rejection, if you still look for signs to calm down, then your vibration continues to point to one thing: I'm not yet. And if you're not already, the field can't respond with what you want. It can only reflect what you vibrate most firmly. And here's the most sensitive point. Most of your vibration doesn't come from what you think. It comes from what you feel when you're tired, when there's no audience, when you're alone at night, dealing with your silent narratives, your unresolved impulses, the emotional tone you still carry like a second skin. That tone is your signal. And while he doesn't change, reality remains where it has always been. It's not because the universe didn't hear you. It's not because you're not ready. It's because you still live like someone who is waiting, still acts like he needs to prove himself. He still decides like someone who fears losing. He still protects himself like someone who carries distrust. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a flaw. It's just a clear sign you have not yet crossed vibrationally. It is still in the space where the old man still commands the backstage of his creation, even if the stage is decorated with new words. What the field demands now is coherence, not performance, but real vibration. Consistency between what you say you want and what you actually stand for on the frequency it transmits. This is the embodiment. This is a vibrational presence. This is a stabilized identity. Because when you live the transition, it no longer needs to be forced. You no longer need techniques, phrases, or affirmations. The field collapses because you are already in resonance. And this resonance is not achieved in a day. It is not born from a mystical leap. It is built in the repetition of the new, in the silent rehearsal of being who you want to be before the world confirms you. This is the point at which many turn back. They want the new, but they haven't yet learned to live as if it were already here. They still wait for reality to change, and only then change with it. But at the quantum level, the order is reversed. You live as if you already were. You vibrate as who you already are. And that is exactly what makes reality collapse. Not by magic, but by inevitable coherence. You don't create a new timeline with positive thinking. You activate it when stop behaving like someone who belongs to the old one. And this is not a one-time decision. It is an ongoing practice. It's a dance between the new that is still fragile and the old that still tries to seduce. But with every gesture, with every choice, with every instant in which you remain in the new, even without proof, you are collapsing the past. And that's where the transition starts to happen. Not because you understood, but why you started living like someone who no longer needed to understand in order to continue being. You think the past is in time, but it isn't. It is in your gesture, the way you grit your teeth when faced with unexpected news, the way your chest tightens when something good happens and you think it's going to end, in the impulse to justify their choices, in the uncomfortable silence when you feel like you've taken up too much space. The past does not live in memories. It lives in an energetic signature that you still reproduce, even when you swear you've gotten over it. It's in the reflex, in the habit, in the micro movement that happens before you even think. And that's why you feel trapped. Not because you still believe the same stories, but why still responds as if he believes. The quantum transition is not a portal that opens. It is a frequency that is interrupted. It begins the moment you stop repeating, with your body, with the field, with your internal rhythm, what was once automatic. But breaking this cycle requires more than intention. It demands attention that sees where the old man still runs his life by remote control. And it's subtle. You say you trust the flow, but you speed up when things take longer. You say you love yourself, but you still hesitate before saying no. You say you let go, but you still watch the signs like you're waiting for approval. You say you've changed, but your vibration is still in alert mode, always preparing for the worst, always defending yourself before the attack, always adjusting your tone to avoid rejection. That's the old you, not in thought form, but in the form of conditioning, and the field does not move according to its logic. He responds to the conditioning you haven't seen yet, and everything that is not seen continues to operate. Anything that continues to operate continues to collapse. That's why, despite everything you've already understood, life still gives you the same situations with different faces. The field is showing you what still needs to be disabled at the auto-response level. And that is liberating. Because it means you don't have to change everything at once. No need to force a mystical leap. You just need to start observing the gesture, the breath that shortens, the contraction that precedes the apology that you don't even feel, the haste with which you change the subject when you touch on something that exposes you, the urgency with which you try to clear your vibration when something gets out of control. These are the fragments that keep the old alive, fragments you inherited, that you learned to repeat to survive. But what no longer matches the new reality you want to inhabit. And when you see them and choose to obey, something changes. Not in the world yet, but in the field, because the signature starts to change. The signal you transmit begins to destabilize the previous timeline. And that's the beginning of the transition. Not the glorious moment where everything changes, but the quiet moment where you do something different for the first time, where you don't respond like you always did, where you stay present while the old man tries to pull you in. And as small as it may seem, this moment is the beginning of the vibrational collapse of the past. There are no portals shining. There are no masters applauding you. There's only one new gesture, a gesture you've never had the courage to make. And that gesture, it is already the new reality asking for passage. You don't need to be enlightened to change. You just need to stop repeating. And it starts in the body, in the reflection, in everyday life. The frequency of the past is where you still say yes meaning no, where you still seek acceptance instead of being true, where you still control, hide, diminish, where you still act like you need to be saved. That's where the loop holds. That's where reality doesn't seem to change, because the issuer is still the same. But now you've started to see, and what is seen can no longer be repeated in the same way. You don't have to fight the past. You just need to cease to be useful to him. And that's what we start doing when we decide to live like who is no longer compatible with the old frequency. You spent your life trying to overcome the old, trying to heal from it, resolve it, overcome it, illuminate it. He did therapy, did constellations, prayed, meditated. He screamed, wrote letters, wiped away memories. And for a while, all of this brought you relief. But deep down, there was still something pulling you back. A trail that would not dissolve, an echo that remained active, even after all the effort. Because the old man doesn't go away when you beat him. It disappears when you stop responding like him. And that changes everything. Because it's not about fighting your story, but to understand when she is still expressing herself through you. And choose not to collaborate. It's not about overcoming fear, but to stop obeying him. It's not about killing the ego, but to stop following your automatic commands. It's not about healing the wounded child, but don't let her pilot your gift. The field doesn't need you to be perfect. He needs you to be consistent with who he says he is becoming. And coherence does not require a resolved past. She only demands that you stop using the past as an excuse to stay the same. And that can be uncomfortable, because there's a part of you that identifies with that past, who built his entire personality on top of it, who feels safe in it, because she knows every corner, every reaction, every emergency exit. Old man, you are a survival expert. But now, you don't want to survive anymore. You want to exist in a new timeline. You want to create, expand, manifest from another place, where you don't need to hide, protect yourself, or adapt to be accepted. But this requires a radical choice. Stop acting like you still belong to the old, even when the body screams. Even when fear tries to negotiate, even when your mind tries to convince you that you are being irresponsible or naive or arrogant. Because the old doesn't go away with a ritual. He goes away when you do malnourishes. When you stop feeding it, you get the same reactions. When you stop moving around it. When you look at him and say with your body, I understand that you existed to protect me, but I don't need to protect myself from that anymore. And in that moment, something switches off. You don't fight. You don't run away. You just no longer cooperate. And the vibration changes, because its field is no longer useful for the loop. You cease to be a standard transmitting station. You cease to be a channel compatible with the past, and the past without energy to circulate collapses. This is not immediate. It's not spectacular. It's almost invisible. You continue your life, follow your routine, but something inside you does not react as before. You don't beg for love. You don't explain too much. You don't force connection. You don't seek validation. You don't need to be convinced. You just, and that presence, that new silent tone is what finally dissolves the old. Not in anger, not in a hurry, but with the neutrality of who. There is no longer any reason to respond as before. This is a transition, not a war against the old version of yourself, but the slow, steady, compassionate deactivation of what no longer serves the identity you are anchoring. Reality doesn't change because you yell at the past. It changes when you stop whispering the same frequencies. And at this point, the field hears something new, a sign he's never received from you before, a silence that is not absence. It is real presence. Presence of someone who is no longer asking. He's not trying anymore. It is no longer in process. It is being, and the universe responds. You think you need proof, signs, external confirmation that you are on the right path, that reality is aligning, that the news is coming, but that's still the old man in disguise. It's the old frequency disguised as a lofty intention. Because the real news, no proof needed. I need stability. It's easy to vibrate differently for a moment, make a bold choice, take a new stance, speak with courage. But the field doesn't respond in an instant. He responds to vibrational consistency. This is why many demonstrations seem to fail to materialize, because the new signal is sent and then collected, sent and then doubted, sustained until the first lack of response, and then you back off, go back to doing what you always did. He goes back to justifying himself, rushing, begging. He tries again to solve the field, as if it were an equation to be manipulated. But the field is not convinced with effort. They reorganize from stability, from what you can sustain even when not being rewarded. That's the real test, and it's not a moral test. It's just the vibrational nature of reality. When you start emitting a new signal, the universe needs to understand if this signal is transient or stable. If it comes from fear disguised as desire, or the silent conviction of those who it is. And this is where you are invited to remain, even without an answer, even without guarantees, even though nothing around has changed yet. It's when everything inside you says it's not worth it, that is taking too long, that might not work, and yet you stay. You breathe, you line up, you hold the vibrational signature of the new, without asking for a sign. This is the most fertile moment of the transition, the space between what you've let go of and what hasn't arrived yet, where only you and your frequency. And the question the field hears is not what you want. It is, can you keep this even if nothing changes now? Because if you can, then your new timeline is not a gamble. It is not a request. It's an identity. An identity is magnetic. She pulls everything towards herself. She doesn't beg. She isn't convinced. She is attracted by the inevitable resonance, but only when you do not back down, when you decide you're not going to trade with the old one anymore. That will no longer trade your frequency for comfort. That will no longer calibrate your truth based on the behavior of others, that you will keep the vibration of the new, regardless of what is around. This is vibrational stability. It's what turns a choice into reality. This is what communicates to the universe. This isn't a phase anymore. This is me now. And when the field feels this, not by words, but by constant energy signature, he starts to bend, slowly, precisely, undeniably. The pieces start to move. The meetings change tone. Situations begin to unfold with a different logic, and what once seemed distant, impossible, improbable, starts to happen. Not because you ask for it stronger, but why do you sustain it longer? Reality doesn't need to be forced. She needs to be instructed firmly, coherently, with a stable vibration. This is how she learns who you have become. And at that point, you're no longer trying to create a new life. You are already living its frequency. And that is irreversible. You've made it this far. He did what few can, released the old one. He stopped obeying, stopped repeating, stopped frequently feeding what no longer resonates with who you choose to be. But now, something strange happens. You look around and you don't see anything new. Look inside and you can't find the old man anymore. What's left is a strange space, a silence, a time that seems frozen. Nothing happens. You don't feel like chasing anymore. But he also sees no clear signs of progress. You no longer fit into the old, but you also still don't live what you imagined as new. It's as if you're suspended between two worlds. No references, no guarantees, no ground. And this place, for many, is scary, because it is the interval, the place where quantum time rearranges itself, the space where the universe is still reprogramming the fabric of your reality from your new signature. And this is where most give up. Because I expected speed, I expected movement, I was waiting for an answer. But this space does not respond to haste. He responds to the presence. The break is not a punishment, it is gestation. It is the blind spot between the collapse of the old and the flowering of the new. And all he asks is that you don't run away, because if you can handle this place, if you can bear the silence, if you stop demanding clues, you will start to feel something different, not an external sign, but an internal expansion, a kind of relief that doesn't depend on what happens, but on what you stopped controlling. This space between identities is where the field watches you most closely, not to test you, but to understand if the new you is already trustworthy, whether the new stable signature resists emptiness, if you can live without maps, no plates, no guarantees. This is where you learn to move through internal impulse, not by the world's response. This is where you discover that the universe does not reward speed. He responds to continuous signals, and your new signal is being broadcast now. Even if no one sees, even if nothing happens, even if you are still silent, this silence is the womb of the new reality. And the longer you stay here, but you realize there is nothing wrong, you just is no longer in linear time. You are in the fold, at the vibrational intersection where space is still being stitched together, where variables are still reallocating to reflect the new emitter you have become. And as uncomfortable as it may seem, you've already left the loop, because only those who already have access to the interval does not vibrate like before. This is the confirmation that the ego never sees. But the field accurately recognizes you are silent, but you are not in doubt. You are paused, but you are not in collapse. You are present, and that is enough. And that's why reality begins to bend, silently. The break is not the end. It is the invisible transition between two frequencies. And if you can inhabit it with acceptance, with breathing, with presence, it becomes the most sacred bridge in your life. Because it is in him that you are no longer asking, not even waiting, not even reacting. You're just vibrating firmly, even without applause. And when that happens, when you become stable, even in nothingness, the field begins to respond with everything. You already understand. In the mind, everything makes sense. You have already accessed clarity. You've already read, studied, felt the call, already recognizes old patterns. You already know that you no longer want to operate from pain, fear, and scarcity. But still, something pulls. Something trembles inside when you try to sustain the new for more than a few days. Something silently collapses in your system before any concrete transformation. And that something is not a lack of faith. It's not a disrespect. It's just the body, which is still in the past. The body has not yet understood what the mind already knows. He's still stuck in the old groove, to survival responses, to the emotional memories that were not thought of, were felt deeply, without words. For while the mind changes with arguments, the body only changes with security. And security for him is what it is familiar. Even if the familiar is painful, even if it's a fight, even if it's scarcity, hyper-alertness, anxiety, the body does not distinguish between good and bad. He distinguishes known from unknown. And every time you try to live as your new self, he reacts as if he were being threatened. Because you don't know that rhythm. He doesn't recognize that gesture. He doesn't understand that silence without anxiety. And then, he pulls you back. It drives you to act like before, to accelerate, to justify, to please, to avoid. But that's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are reprogramming the body, and that doesn't happen in an insight. It happens in layers, in practice, in repeated choices with compassion, not in a hurry, with presence. Why is it necessary? Teach the body to feel safe in the new. You need to breathe differently, walk differently, move with another presence, respond in a different tone, stop before automatic boost. Give the body new experiences that prove to him that he no longer needs to defend himself. And that takes time, because it's a dance with the nervous system, a re-education of internal chemistry, a training that no course can give you, just life and your daily choice of not to collapse with the old. You will feel the old one trying to take over you. You will feel your body wanting to run, escape, avoid. But in that moment, if you stop, breathe, stay, you write a new memoir. Not in the brain, more pellets, in the chest, our muscles, our gestures, and each new memory felt is a brick in the identity of your new self. Because there is no point in thinking like someone who lives in abundance if your body still shrinks in the face of a charge. There is no point in declaring self-love if your system still prepares for rejection with every intimate conversation. There is no point in visualizing a new reality if your physiology is still operating in threat mode. The body is the portal. Without it, there is no quantum collapse. Without it, the field does not receive the new signal. You need to vibrate the new with the skin. And it starts in small moments, small gestures, small interruptions of the pattern. Don't react as usual. Don't justify like before. Don't run away from discomfort. Stay present, breathing. These pauses build the bridge between knowing and being, and little by little, the body begins to relax into the new, feeling like you can trust, realizing you don't need to hide anymore. That new frequency, it's not a risk, it's home. And when the body understands this, reality begins to collapse differently, because now you are vibrating with full integrity, mind, emotion, gesture, energy, all aligned, all supporting the same truth. This is the new me, and he is safe here. You tried to sustain the new with effort, with focus, with discipline, with affirmations, repetitions, practices, and for a while, it worked. But there was tension, there was fear of losing alignment, to slip, to go backward, because the new was still fragile, a place you visited but didn't inhabit. Now something is starting to change. You wake up and you don't have to remember who you're trying to be anymore. You simply and. Your body responds calmly. Your mind no longer races in the face of silence. Your system doesn't go into alarm mode when something doesn't go as expected. You don't need to repeat mantras to feel grounded, because the new is already your basal tone. It's subtle, but it's revolutionary. The transition is no longer a task and becomes your internal environment. You no longer need to watch every thought, not because he gave up, but because reprogrammed. What once required effort is now familiar. What once required courage now is its natural state. That's when you realize that it's not the effort that sustains the new, is the vibrational intimacy. You no longer wonder if you are aligned. You feel it. You know. No arrogance, no doubt. With the silent certainty of someone who stabilized the field. This does not mean that everything around has changed, but it means that you have changed and remain. You stop trying to keep up because she already belongs to you. And that changes the game, because the field responds with a delay, always responded. And now that you are no longer wavering, testing, or waiting, the delay begins to dissolve. The news begins to arrive, not like magic, but like a consequence, like a mirror, as a faithful reflection of who you have become in silence, without an audience. Without an audience. You realize that you no longer fear discomfort, that is no longer shaken by absence, who no longer trades his truth for convenience, because the new, it's no longer news, it's home. And at this point, something rare happens. You stop looking for signs and becomes the sign itself. You walk as if you have already received it, breathe like who you already are. He moves like he no longer needs to prove anything. The new reality is still taking shape, but the most important thing has already happened. You stop doubting your frequency. And when that happens, the universe stops functioning as a retroactive mirror. he passes to anticipate their movements, meeting you around the next bend with synchronicities, people, paths, answers. Not because you asked, but why have you stabilized? You have become predictable to the field. And reality loves vibrational predictability because she can trust you. She can give you what you said you wanted because now you sustained. Not with effort, but naturally, with familiarity, with presence. This is the clearest sign that the transition is taking hold. You stopped fighting, stopped running, stopped waiting, and yet you remain. Because now it's the new one who's afraid of losing you. You spent years thinking that reality was an obstacle, something that needed to be overcome, tamed, changed by force, something that resisted, that tested his faith, that blocked what you asked for, which delayed his blessings like a mysterious cosmic punishment. But now, you see, she never resisted. She just reflected. Reality has no opinion. He has no morals. There is no judgment. She is a quantum mirror, absolute, silent, that responds to its coherence. While you vibrated a desire with your body still on alert, she responded to the alert. As you asked for love with your heart still bound by the fear of rejection, she reflected fear. While you affirmed abundance with the frequency of scarcity, she returned scarcity. Not because I wanted to sabotage you, but why don't I know how to do anything else? She doesn't create alone. She collapses from who you are, not what you say. And now that your field has changed, now that your vibration is stable, now that you have stopped negotiating, hesitating, doubting, she starts to bend, and not by magic, but for a response. The universe has no free will about how it reacts to you. He is programmable, and the language of programming is vibration. You are no longer trying to change reality. You are becoming the version that naturally generates another reality, and that's why everything starts to happen. Conversations change, opportunities appear, coincidences multiply. The previously closed doors open with an almost comical lightness, because now you are something else, and reality recognizes. She can't resist the new. She collapses before him. Not because you convinced her, but why you became impossible to ignore. The new timeline begins to reveal itself, not because you shouted louder, but because you stayed longer, because you maintained the vibration even when there was no external indication, because you held out for the signature when everything seemed to stand still, because you didn't back down when the silence tried to scare you. And now the field recognizes you. He says this signal no longer oscillates. He no longer hesitates. It's not temporary anymore. This sign is real. And this is what reality collapses into. Not what you want, but what do you support with stability? And it all starts to make sense. You understand it wasn't about trying harder. It was about vibrating with integrity, with presence, with familiarity. You realize that reality was never personal. She wasn't punishing you. She was just mirroring the sender that you were. And now you are someone else. No need to justify anymore. Not even to prove. Don't even ask. You just vibrate. And the universe, obedient, builds around the new issue. It is at this point that the transition ceases to be internal and begins to materialize with precision externally. You don't need to control anything. You just need to continue to be. And what once seemed like a resistance to reality now reveals itself as a delayed response to your old version. The delay is over because you took on the new without a doubt. You no longer need to wait for the signal because now you are the sign. You are no longer trying to manifest something. You became someone who naturally creates what once seemed impossible. And even though circumstances are still lining up, even though some pieces are still falling into place, you don't back down because you already understood reality is slower than vibration, but she is faithful. And now that your field is firm, clear, coherent, she has no choice. What you sustain with stability becomes inevitable, not by merit, not by karma, not by luck, but for frequency stabilized in identity. You stopped asking, stopped tasting, he stopped explaining. You just breathe, present, aligned, whole. And the universe, which previously responded to you with uncertainty, now answer you accurately, with certain meetings, with unexpected connections, with paths that open up because you are no longer oscillating. This is what you needed to remember, that there is no resistant reality. There is inconsistent frequency. There is an unstable identity. But now that's over. You have stabilized, not because it has reached perfection, but because he stopped retreating. He stopped apologizing for who he is. Stop trading with the old one. You are no longer in transition. You crossed. And what comes next? It's not magic. It is coherence in action. You will no longer see to believe. You're going believe. With the whole body, with the whole gesture, with the whole vibration, until reality has no choice but to show itself. Because she always shows it. She always mirrors. It always collapses. And now that you have become a clear, continuous, non-negotiable field, she can only do one thing: respond.